Feeling well.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 27th edition of the Plaistow Zoning Board meeting. Dee, would you kindly call the roll?
Peter Bealow.
I'm here.
Dan Lloyd is excused. John Blinn.
Here.
Jonathan Gifford.
Here.
Gary Ingham.
Here.
Ethan Connolly.
Here.
And I would like to introduce everybody to Jim Unger here, who is observing this evening, and we're trying to convert him into the ZBA clan as an alternate of the board.
Please don't use the term ZBA and clan in the same sentence. Appreciate that.
I meant that in the familial sense.
Okay. And in case anybody doesn't know, Jim actually is like not just a Plaistonian, he's like literally across the street. He has a yellow house at the corner of Elm and Main Street, a beautiful house with the cool cars in the backyard. Okay, we need to appoint Ethan as a voting member this evening. Okay, and with that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Jim, would you lead us in the pledge?
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As an ex-Boy Scout troop leader here, he's still?
I'm the Eagle Advisor.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Before we get to the cases, I think we have a set of minutes to take a look at here. Where'd you put them, Dee? All the way in the back?
You had them in the packet you took home
Oh, I
with you.
did. Oh, sorry. I thought it was separated out.
No.
Okay. Let's take a minute to read them. Okay. All the votes are right. Are we ready with this? Any changes? You good with them?
Could I have a motion, please?
Let's have a motion.
Could we motion to accept the minutes as written from our last meeting?
Seconded.
Second.
Okay.
Seconding's okay, and you can, you don't have to be here in order to vote for minutes, but I think most people believe it's probably best for them to abstain.
Agree.
Okay?
Peter Bealow.
Yes.
John Blinn.
Abstain.
Jonathan Gifford.
Yes.
Gary Ingham.
Yes.
Ethan Connolly.
Abstain.
Okay. So thank you for that. We have a yes, we have a five-person board tonight, so I don't have to do the spiel about having a smaller board than required. Let's get to the first hearings here. Dee, would you call the hearings?
The first three are interrelated. Would you like me to read them all together?
I was going to suggest that, yes.
Okay. Case number 20-01, a request from FDPC Realty LLC, Free Dog, for a variance from Article 4, Section 220-21A, 1 and 2, to permit elevated dog runs structures to be built within the 25-foot no-cut, no-disturb wetland buffer. The property is located at 118 Sweet Hill Road, tax map 69, lot 38 in the ICR district. The applicant is the property owner of record. All three of these have the same applicant and property owner. The 220-02 is a variance request from Article 4, Section 220-21B, 1 and 2, to permit elevated dog runs to be built within the 50-foot no construction wetland buffer. The last request is from Article 5, Table 220-32I, to permit elevated dog run structures and a portion of the enclosed dog room to be 22 feet from the front property line, where 50 feet is the minimum required.
Okay. So who's representing you?
Charlie is.
And he is who? I don't recognize him.
SEC.
You've been here before,
Yes,
once
he's
or
been
twice anyhow.
With us,
For the record,
for the record.
Charlie.
Charlie Zilch from SCC and Associates, here with, or on behalf of FDPC Realty LLC, which better known as Free Dog. Jennifer Lee sitting with me
Yeah.
here, as well as Cindy Stein, who's over here behind us with her arm raised. And this is for the property located at 118 Sweet Hill Road. And if I could just get familiar with the layout here. So this is plans.
If you minimize that, you'll see the list of them, Charlie.
Okay. So I've got plans here and.
Minimize that one.
Oh,
One more.
beautiful. And then photos too?
Minimize that.
She's all about minimization.
And, oh, go down to the folder on the bottom.
Yep.
And there's your photos.
Okay. I'll bring them all up, and that'll be
Sweet.
easy to just jump back and forth from one to the other. So as you just read into the minutes, this is an application to obtain 3 different variances. First, to allow proposed structures, which I'll get to in a minute, to be constructed within the wetlands, no cut, no disturb buffer. The second, to allow the proposed structures to be within the wetlands buffer. And the third, to allow the proposed structures to be constructed within the building setback. As shown in the plans before you, and as well as up on the screen here, this is a 2.9 acre site. It has 453 feet of frontage on Sweet Hill Road and 306 feet of frontage on Route 108. The parcel is located entirely within the town of Plaistow's ICR, Integrated Commercial Residential Zone, and supports the current business, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, is their dog kennel and daycare facility. So anybody that has a dog here has probably visited the site, I'm sure, at one time or another. So right now, the business is operated by Free Dog. As I announced, Jennifer and Cindy, they purchased it in 2009. At that time, it was just an existing single-family dwelling, and with the help of an approved site plan, they converted the dwelling to the dog kennel and daycare facility that it is today. So basically on site, you have a 3,000 square foot commercial building, which consists of office and living space as well as the boarding areas. Several enclosed ground level dog runs are located outside of the facility. The building itself is supported by its own individual on-site septic system and water supply. Access to the building, as I'm sure you're familiar, is from Sweet Hill Road with the parking in front of the building along Sweet Hill Road. And then they do have a stormwater catchment area located off to the left of the building as you face it from Sweet Hill Road. So as I said, an approved site plan constructed per that site plan and operated in that capacity from that approval. So at this point, Jennifer and Cindy operate an additional facility that you may be familiar with over on Garden Road. And apparently running the 2 businesses become somewhat burdensome for them, difficult. So what they would like to do is close down the Garden Road business and consolidate the business to this site. We looked at any way of possibly expanding the Garden Road site, and it's such a small lot, wetlands behind it, there's absolutely no chance of doing anything there. So we took a look at this, and that's why this application is before you. Bigger site, a little bit more opportunity to do something with. So what is being contemplated, it's different. This is something I've never dealt with before, but it's unique. So let me just kind of run through it. What they want to do is they want to expand the daycare at the site. This would be accomplished by providing additional outdoor and enclosed space for the dogs. And the way they're going to do that, rather than creating more ground level fenced-in outdoor space, their architect has come up with a rather unique plan that would attach enclosed space adjacent to the left and rear of the building with dog runs projecting out from there. These runs would be elevated, whereas the topography drops off from the first floor level from where they would attach to the building. Each run would be supported by a series of posts to secure them to the ground. So let me kind of show you what that entails. Here's the building, and it's got a first floor entrance with the parking right off of Sweet Hill Road. And then the topography drops off to the back and it drops off to the side. This is where that detention drainage area is over here. So what they're contemplating doing is at that first floor level, when you get to the back of the building, you're elevated at this point. They want to attach these elevated dog runs, 4 of them in the back, 3 of them along the side. And so as they get out to the limit of their run, they're well elevated above the ground. They're attached to the ground by posts. So they're basically elevated dog runs. Close to the building, they'll have awning to provide the dogs some shade, and then there's a fully enclosed space in the back of the building. So they'll be able to come in here completely covered, partial cover, and then enjoy the daylight out here. So very unique. If you look at the plans, this is some of the architect's renderings. You can see this is the plan view of it, showing you the dimensions of the elevated dog runs and how they attach to the building. And then we've also got, this is another plan view, floor plan. This one here kind of shows you how it would look. That's the front of the building, right?
Yep.
Yeah, front of the building. That's the elevated dog run off to the side of the building. And then as you come around, this is looking from the 108 side?
Yep.
Yeah, and then see, 100% so far. And this is the elevated dog runs from the back of the building. So they're basically enclosed to the point where you have, let me just back to this one, you have walls all the way around them. They're 6 foot tall.
Yeah, so they're basically, if you go by our building, you see some of the fencing that we have currently around the dog daycare, as well as the kennel. And so the enclosement would be very similar to that. So allowing airflow to go through, but also having some solid fencing so that you can buffer the sound and stuff like that. But we're also allowing the flow of what's behind and underneath to happen as well. So not trying to impede on what's there naturally, which is what we went through for the Conservation Committee, to make sure that we're not disturbing that too much.
And so the reason we're before this board tonight is there's a couple of variances here. I know there's 3. 2 of them are associated with wetlands and 1 is associated with setback to property line, front property line. So you can see as the building's situated here, there's a wetland that kind of bisects the property that runs across the back of it. This was delineated by our wetland soil scientist, Timothy Forwarda. It's poorly drained soils. When you hold your setback from the 50-foot setback, so it'd be your 25-foot no cut and then the additional 25 for poorly drained soil, that setback line runs right through here. You can see it nips a couple of those off to the side, and then it basically goes through the 4 out of 4 in the back. And then you have the 25-foot no cut, no disturb, which is right here, and that affects just basically maybe one and just a little bit of a corner of the other one. The other setback that we're at odds with is you have a pretty substantial setback from 108. Currently, the building is partially within that setback. This run here would be within it, and then just a little bit of this setback here as well. This is the setback line from 108. So those are the variances that we're seeking tonight. So as I go through the criteria, I'll explain more about the dog runs and what they entail. As Jen mentioned, we went to the Conservation Commission with them. We showed this to them, answered quite a few of the questions and incorporated some of their thoughts into the design of this. And so you have a letter from them saying they have no objection to the proposal. And before we even started with this, like I said, this is kind of unusual. For me, I've never really dealt with this. I'm usually dealing with buildings on top of foundations, that sort of thing. So I talked to Mike Dorman, and he took a good look at it, and he said these are definitely structures and that they would require relief from the zoning board. So we met with Mike. He had issued his finding on it, and then we met with Conservation. And so now we're here.
So what would these piers or pilings, whatever, be made of?
Just wood.
And given that they're close to wetlands, I know they're not in wetlands.
Correct.
Is there any issue with how deep they have to be in the ground or something to be stable?
That I don't know. I would imagine they would probably have to be supported like anything, any sort of deck post, that sort of thing. I would imagine the architect is going to incorporate or design a base that will support the loading of it. I don't think they're really that heavy. I mean, there's really not a lot to them. It's basically the decking material, the material that's going to be on the deck, which I'll describe in a minute, and then just the 6-foot wall. So they're not enclosed, there's no roof, and they're going to be,
Will they be putting sonotubes in, and
I would imagine, yeah, you probably have at least sonotubes, and
so
then,
you'd be at least 4 or 5
I would
feet
think
down
so, yeah,
into-
probably get yourself below frost line.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So you're calling these runs, but at the end of the day, these are decks for the dogs.
It's
Pretty
really
much,
what they are,
yeah,
yeah.
what they are.
Yep.
Yep.
Are they, the flooring of it, is that wood as well? Is it fence?
So what we're contemplating between two different flooring structures. So yes, there would be obviously some wood structure underneath that. But from a standpoint of with the dogs, it would either be a turf-like solution. They have come a long way. We need to do a little bit more research on that. If we find that that turf-based solution is not good for drainage and a few other things that we meet for criteria for what we want for the daycare, it would be pea stones that we would placed in there, which is what we currently use today. But it doesn't even have to be that thick, it just has to be enough to be able to capture so that when waste happens, we can pick that up and remove it, because we have a company that removes that from the facility. So it would be one of those two things. Yep.
But there's no roof on it,
Nope,
so it's basically, it's not like a impervious.
correct.
So I do have one question.
Sure.
It appears that if you went, these are 25 foot. If you went to 20 feet, you'd probably elude a lot of these lines that you're concerned with,
As far as
going out past the 25.
The only concern for me would be, and I mean, I'm not an architect to look at that, but from a business perspective and understanding of dogs, you know, footprint matters. So you have the airspace that constitutes additional footprint to help reduce any kind of behavioral issues due to territory shortness. But at the same token, you do need that space to be able to run the dogs and do that kind of stuff, which is why we calculated what we calculated. We've been doing this a long time, behaviorally. I'm
making
just,
a
but answer the question.
Simple observation
Yeah.
that if you drop
Yeah,
5
but-
feet off, you probably
But-
would only run into an issue with one of your platforms.
Yep, and we did take that into consideration.
Okay.
We did. Yeah, there's different, so small dog yard,
She can't sit back there and talk.
I know.
You're gonna talk, you're gonna be
you
on the
gotta
mic.
talk if you're gonna talk.
If that was the end all, I mean, if that was the, you know, the killing point of it or whatever, that, we could make that the smaller dog yard. The smaller dogs don't need quite as much room to run. So,
Right.
that,
I'm not sure all of my calculations by just looking at this and
Right,
saying
right.
5 feet would be sufficient, but it appears to be that 5 feet would bring you 25 away from the street and all the way away from
Yeah.
your concerns on the wetlands in the back.
I think it would get them outside of the 25-foot do not disturb. I mean, they're just clipping it with that one. The other
Right.
ones would all be outside of it, but the other the other two variances, I think.
No, I think Ethan's right. Of the 4 in the back, there's just one that it seems to jut into. Well, one of them barely touches the 25-foot setback, but the one to the furthest on the left-hand side seems to be the one that's the closest and within the 25-foot setback.
And you're only talking about putting one lolly in that,
Yes.
or one sonnet in that setback area, which is 2 feet over the setback, or whatever it looks like. Okay.
And it doesn't even, if they cantilever it, it may not even be that bad. You know, you don't have to have the support all the way at the end of the structure.
And they're not.
Correct.
Right, oh,
If you look close, they're set back a few feet.
okay.
Can you go back to the rendering? Might show
Horizontal.
the elevation you had up.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, you
Yep,
might be
yep.
out of the,
I see.
actually, no, you can see it on the plan right here.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right, Ethan. You can see I think one of the plans showed the attachment points.
Yep.
Is this the one?
No, it's this full plan's got it on there. see the,
Oh, we did have it on there, okay.
see the footing.
Yeah, you can see the attachment points there. Yeah.
Hey, with this plan, how, let's see, what's the distance between the northern end of the left run and the abutter to the north?
From the abutter up here
Yeah,
to this, I'm gonna,
so go left, yeah, from that point to him is,
from here to here,
yeah,
I'm gonna guess you're looking at, if that's 50, I'm gonna say probably about 125 feet.
And again, these yards would be during the day.
right.
They would not be at night, or theoretically even the weekends.
That's property line, you're probably looking at more like 150 plus to the house. There's
Right.
the house there.
And that's pretty much fully treed back there, too.
It is, this is fully wooded, yep.
I would assume they're pretty used to dogs by now.
And we do try to get them tired, because we do sleep there.
Charlie, you got the filtration system.
Yes,
Those seem to be popping up a lot lately.
yeah,
Why did you put it in that particular spot, and how are you going to direct it over to it?
because we didn't want it to be directed off to the wetland. We want to be able to capture it and gutter it towards the area that we've shown. We've got one basically here.
Yeah.
So we figured that we could split the difference and basically just have a slight grade in from each end and able to gutter it down into a filtration system here, and then we have another one over here underneath this one as well. So we'll have no runoff directly going out into the wetland. We'll be able to capture it and get into that stone trench.
And how'd you pick the size?
Excuse me?
How did you come up with the size of the rock bed for the filtration?
Basically, I just use the DES standard for it.
Any other immediate questions, folks? Jim, do you want to ask, do you have any question down there?
Pretty much all
You're not a board member, but you can definitely ask questions as a,
And just one other thing, John, with these kind of rock trenches that you're seeing more and more of, and I use them more and more in my design, the biggest thing is when the initial rains come, if there's been an extended time of things being exposed with no rain, that's when your pollutants build up, your sediments and things like that. So that initial wash of the stormwater carries away a lot of that. And so it's important to get that into a stone trench or into your infiltration system immediately. If the rains continue and are persistent, eventually they're going to overtop it. But at that point, the pollutants, the sedimentation, all that stuff is into the filtration system. It's into the ground. It's not being sheet flowed down into your wetlands. So usually at that point, say after a couple of days of rain, continued rain, that rainwater is just plain rainwater, and it's running off into the wetlands. So they will eventually overtop in most cases, unless you've got like really, really porous soils, and not an awful lot of that around.
okay. Carry on, sir. We kind of stopped you.
Well, no, I think that was pretty much it. I kind of got to the question and answer period. So, again, it's three different variances. The variance for the request for the impact within the wetlands, they're very similar, if not pretty much the same, identical, the criteria for that. And then there's a slightly different set of circumstances for the criteria for the setback for the roadway.
Okay, let's go through the criteria.
Sure.
And if you could, as far as I'm concerned, at least, I'm not speaking for the whole board, you don't have to say every word that you've put into that justification.
Okay. I think actually probably the first one, it is important because we talk about a lot of things like with the dog waste and what we're doing with the filtration. Then after that, it's kind of redundant after that. But so obviously this is a variance request to permit portions of the elevated dog runs to be allowed within the 25-foot no cut, no disturb buffer, and that'll be 16 feet at its closest point. And then the other wetland buffer is to be allowed within the 25-foot buffer from poorly drained, 50 feet total from edge of wetland, and again, 16 feet at the closest point of the wetland limit there as well. So if we can kind of consider them both as one application, and you can vote at them however you'd like to. So, not contrary to the public interest, because by granting the variance to allow Free Dog the full productive use of the property by allowing the expansion necessary to combine the two businesses. The structures proposed are elevated dog runs. These runs are a wood-framed structure elevated by posts and tie into the existing building. Each run is enclosed by a 6-foot-tall solid fence, and the floor is covered in pea stone. That was one of the options. Each run, approximately 1/3 of the run will be shaded by a canvas and aluminum framed awning affixed to the rear of the building. A gutter drain system will pick up the stormwater runoff from the exposed deck and direct it to a stone infiltration trench located below. Fecal matter from the dogs is collected several times a day and is stored in enclosed containers on the site, much like with their open space now. The waste is then picked up twice a week by a company canine custodian who disposes of the waste at an approved facility. Urine from the dogs mostly evaporates off of the pea stone. Free Dog also applies a spray-on biodegradable agent, Clean Break, designed to dissolve and break down the urine. The measures ensure water quality is maintained within the wetland buffer. In regards to the increase in dogs and the potential noise, the dogs will be enclosed by solid fencing, thereby reducing distraction and the potential for barking. Additionally, this is a proposal to increase the daycare facility and not the boarding, meaning that the increase in dogs on site will only occur during normal business hours. So all considered, the nature of the additions and their location do not negatively affect the general health, welfare, and safety of the general public. And the intent of the ordinance is preserved. As you know, the intent of the ordinance is to protect and buffer the wetlands. And in this case, we're building these decks within an area that's partially lawn space, and then some of it is partially wooded. We intend to preserve as much of that green space below these decks as possible. They are elevated. So, and, you know, when you consider the infiltration trench that we're going to be designing to go along with this, and that we're going to preserve as much of that green space as possible, I think we maintain the intent of that ordinance as best as possible. And number 3, substantial justice in granting the variance. It'll allow Free Dog the most cost-effective means of achieving their goals with the least amount of disturbance to the site or disruption to the business. No adverse effect to the neighboring property owners as well. And the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. It'll allow for the expansion of existing business as allowed in the zone. The structure is designed not only to consider any potential impact to the wetland buffers, but also to consider any potential impact to surrounding properties and their owners as well. As noted and as we've discussed, the structure will be surrounded by a 6-foot-tall privacy fence and only operated during normal business hours. Lighting will only be needed during the shorter seasons, and any lighting will be shielded and directed within each run. And again, the waste matter will be handled accordingly. And
When you
then,
say the lighting shielded, I assume we mean full cutoff lighting?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, and like I said, it's just going to be within the run areas,
It's kind
and
of what
that's
we
it.
do today.
Yeah.
We don't need a lot of it. We just need a little bit of it, and then we actually, during the wintertime, wear headgears to be able to find the poop and stuff like that, so.
Cool.
And then hardship, the site, although large in size, is bisected by the wetland complex. So when applying the wetland setbacks, only the area in which the addition is proposed allows for the greatest level of compliance to the setback requirements. There are no other reasonable alternative locations that would fully comply with the wetland or property line setbacks. And if you did construction in those areas, would require a much greater site disturbance. They'd be away from the building, wouldn't work as well as far as the business. So no real appreciable gains in trying to do something like that. Denial would be an unnecessary hardship due to the uniqueness of the building and the yard space location in relation to the wetlands and the lack of a reasonable alternative location.
Okay.
And like I said, that basically applies to the 50-foot buffer as well.
Okay, so then on to the setback.
Yep. So, again, this is the variance request to permit portions of the elevated dog runs to be within the 50-foot front setback to Route 108, as I shown, and we're only looking at 2 of the runs for the most part. Major portion of this one, and then a smaller portion of this one here on the right side of the building as you face it from Sweet Hill. So, let's see, these runs they're basically a wood frame structure elevated post to tie into the existing building. Each run is enclosed by a 6-foot tall solid fence, and the floor is covered in pea stone. Approximately 1/3 of the run will be shaded. Kind of went through that before. Portion of the 2 runs and a small portion of the enclosed dog room is proposed within the 50-foot front setback to Route 108. The areas within the setback are elevated and allow for ground cover to be maintained. Neither of the proposed structures creates any sort of visual obstruction or hazard to the travelers of Route 108. The closest point is approximately 42 feet from the traveled way. As noted, the structures are fenced and thereby eliminate visual distraction from the dog and/or driver. A natural buffer will remain between the roadway and the proposed structure. All considered, the nature of the additions and their location do not negatively affect the general health and welfare, safety of the general public. The spirit and intent of the ordinance is preserved. The intent of the ordinance is to protect and buffer traveled ways and maintain a uniform setback from buildings to the right-of-way. In this particular case, these dog runs provide outdoor space for the animals, as would a ground-level penned-in area, but in a better controlled environment. These proposed structures are to be constructed on the frontage side that is not encumbered by access or parking. A sufficient buffer will remain, thereby the spirit and the intent of the ordinance will be maintained. And for substantial justice in granting the variance, there'll be no adverse effect to the neighboring property owners or vehicular traffic on Route 108. By granting the variance and allowing construction in an area that will retain ground cover and a natural buffer, will allow the owners to remain at the established site where they can continue with this well-received business. Values of surrounding property owners will not be diminished. As you know, it's allowed in the zone. It's an existing business, and the expansion of the business is just for the daytime kennel. So it really doesn't affect any of the neighbors. It's integrated commercial residential zone in kind with the zone that it's in. And then hardship, again, basically no reasonable alternative. Much like the wetland setbacks, there's really no other place to go with these dog runs that make any sense. You obviously don't want them to go out into the front of the building, over the leach field area, the well, or out into the parking area. So, again, more or less the same criteria for the wetland setback on that part of it.
Okay. Folks, any other questions?
It's not a question, it's a comment.
Yeah.
Regardless of how our vote goes tonight, you ladies deserve a pat on the back for coming up with this plan. You obviously put a lot of thought in it to come up with the most environmentally sound way to benefit yourselves, your neighbors, and this town by not destroying anything. And for that, you should be commended.
I appreciate that, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do. We went back and forth a little bit with the Conservation Committee and took their advice and really got creative, so I appreciate that.
It shows.
Been here a long time, we like this town.
We do like this town.
She's off the mic. You're off the mic again, girl.
Yeah, congratulations on 11 years of success at that location.
Ah,
That's pretty impressive for a small business.
Yeah, thank you, I appreciate that, you know. And again, we if you look at the picture of the front of the building, we're really trying to strive for the same look and not looking like a commercial building or anything like that, kind of trying to fit into what we think it should be for us as well as the town in that lot, you know, so.
Questions, comments from this side? No. Okay, Dee, do we have anybody speaking in favor of this? The audience?
Mom and Dad homes. They don't live in Plaistow.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do we have any letters or anything?
Yes,
In
we
favor?
have a letter from the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
This is addressed to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Conservation Commission reviewed a conceptual amended site plan for the dog daycare facility Free Dog at 118 Sweet Hill Road. The plan shows several intrusions into the wetlands buffer, however, only posts to support the elevated extensions to the existing dog exercise areas are actually in the buffer. One post is in the 25-foot no-cut, no-disturb buffer, and 13 posts are in the 50-foot buffer. Given the very minimal temporary impact to the buffers during installation, construction, and no significant permanent impacts to the buffers, the Conservation Commission does not have any objections to the site plan as presented in November.
Okay, that's all good. Do we have anybody speaking against? We do not. Dee, do you have any letters against?
I do not.
Okay.
One additional comment is this is a concept site plan, so it will have to be submitted at one point or another if this moves forward with the planning board for their approval as well.
Yep.
Okay, that's a good point. So we done, guys? Should I call this hearing closed? Okay, I call this hearing closed. We're going into to deliberate this.
Yeah, I'm good.
Great, thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
very much.
Guys for the time.
Oh,
Really appreciate it.
Also, but, you know, I haven't expressed this in the many months. My condolences to the loss of your dog statue. I mean, that really rots. Somebody stole that, so.
I know. I appreciate that. We have to replace it. Someone donated the shepherd and.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. But we're gonna keep him. He'll watch guard. But we need a softer dog, so. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good night.
You're welcome to stay or leave, your choice. We're gonna decide
We're
this.
going to deliberate right now.
Oh, you're gonna deliberate right now? We'll stay. Okay. Oh, wait. Sorry.
Your choice. So- Okay, so let's look at the first variance request.
May I ask the board to vote on them separately, please?
We will be.
I appreciate that.
That's why I started off saying, let's look at the first one first. This is the no-cut, no-disturb buffer issue. Somebody make a motion, please?
There's a draft motion in the book.
Oh, you
and-
want to read that one? Okay.
Yeah.
I move to grant the application for a variance for Article 4, 220-21, Section A1 and 2, to allow a structure, elevated dog run, to be built within the 25-foot no-disturb wetlands buffer on the property located at 118 Sweet Hill Road, tax map 69, lot 38.
I will second that motion.
I think that was a very eloquent motion,
Thank you.
Gary. Okay, so let's kind of step through the criteria. So proposed variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Does offer them much more productive use of their property. And frankly, doing this elevated design has minimal impact to the town and the property.
In my opinion, I mean, the only where it's truly disturbing is that one post. I mean, it's minimal,
Right.
very minimal.
I'm sorry, Mr. Conley, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you over here.
I said the one post is really, in my mind, the only disturbance. It's minimal, absolutely minimal, so.
Thank you.
Actually, when it comes to public interest, you're setting a precedent that you're working in that 25-foot buffer.
Well,
And my only concern is that we're setting a precedent that we're working in that 25-foot buffer. We don't have a whole lot of waterways here in Plaistow, and to be playing with our 25-foot buffer and setting that precedent is a concern of mine.
but on the other hand, we are only putting one probably 12-inch sonotube of concrete in that buffer area.
Well, they're not adverse to having one short run. They have small dogs. We could mandate that one run is shorter, and we don't have to worry about our 25-foot buffer. That sets them back. And quite honestly, that's not going to change the precedent here in town, because once we say that, someone else is going to come in and say, well, you granted it over here. It's just a concern of mine,
No,
since
I
our
hear you.
waterways here in town are at a minimal.
True. I guess, in theory, we don't set precedences, but on the other hand, emotionally, I have a hard time, not considering something, as a precedent as well. 'Cause let's go through the rest of this.
Okay.
We can come back, we'll circle back to this, okay? Spirit and intent of the ordinance preserved. I think the spirit is preserved, the fact they're doing the elevation and trying to have as minimal an impact as possible. Short of suspending it from trees that already exist,
Well, I mean-
I'm not quite sure how you can minimize it more.
No, I mean, if they put fences on the ground, you'd have runoff constant.
Right.
And fecal matter and urine would be, every time the rain came, someone would be running around with an umbrella out there trying to scoop things up before it washed down into the wetland. So the idea is definitely
Yeah.
a wonderful idea.
Well, why couldn't we move the post and
Yeah. We have the engineer
Get it
look
out
at
of
just moving that one, keep the length of the run, but move the post out of the
Just
25
do a
foot.
Y off of the
Yeah.
top of the post
I
and
mean,
do it
it's-
structurally. That's my only concern, is that 25-foot. I don't care about the other 13 and the 50, because we've passed that a few times already.
Yes.
But the 25 is my only concern.
Okay.
Yeah. I think maybe moving the post then would solve the problem with us and not disturb what they're doing.
Okay, now, do we want to consider that now, or after we
Well,
read the
go
rest of the
through
criteria?
Go through the whole criteria.
There's substantial justice in granting the variance. Would allow them a cost-effective means of achieving their goals, for sure. And whether or not we move that post. And really, the town, especially if that post were moved, the town really, there's no issue at all to the general public. So, values of surrounding properties won't be diminished. Again, we have a good 125 feet to the next property north of them. Across the street is Brandy Brow.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about noise variance.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't see where there's any issue
No,
with
they
that.
don't have any abutting neighbors that are within sound area, I mean, basically.
A literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Well, it is a complex, weird lot, water runoff-wise, or water-wise.
Right.
But again, I think now that we've gone through,
As a taxpayer in town too, they're paying on 3 acres of land here and only being able to use a small portion of it. I mean, I try to look at every aspect when we're talking about this, because they're contributing to the town on 3 acres and actually utilizing probably 3/4 of one.
right. Right. So I'm hearing, at least at this point, John and John mainly, suggesting that we offer an amendment.
You don't have to do that. All you have to do, because this is just the 25-foot, you just have to deny it, and they'd have to redesign it if they want to be able to do it. You don't have to offer an amendment.
But we can.
We can.
You can't without reopening the public hearing, because you don't know if they're going to accept your amendment or not.
can we?
No,
This is, if you, like,
we can make an amendment and make it a condition, and they either do it or
That
they.
condition is different than an amendment.
Okay, so we make a condition.
Okay, we can make it a condition that post move out of that area.
Which is the same as denying the variance.
No, it's allowing the cantilever
Yeah, we're gonna,
overpass, if you will.
Cantilever has nothing to do with it. It's all about the post.
What's the easiest way to do it? So
There you go.
I'll get what we want.
I don't know about that, because we're not saying they gotta pull the overhang back, because that overhangs over the 25-foot. We're not denying that, we just want the post.
It's not the overhang that's in discuss, it's the posts going in the ground. Because you're disturbing the buffer.
The
by putting the
overhang
post
is
in the
fine.
ground.
Can we open
It's
it
the
back up to
post.
public then?
Yeah.
And have a quick discussion with the tenants and see if they
Yes.
have interest
Can we,
in adjusting it before it goes back to the planning?
Gary,
Yes.
would you withdraw your motion and?
I withdraw my motion at this
Withdraw your
time for
second?
further discussion.
Withdraw my second motion.
Okay. And I'd like to reopen the hearing just on the first variance request.
I think I have the answer you're looking for.
Okay.
The request for the variance is for the elevated dog run in its entirety, which Mike Dorman, your building inspector, has deemed as a structure. So the entire dog run, even if it's elevated into the wetland setback, that 25-foot buffer, that's the variance request. If a condition is to move one of the posts so they're not disturbing the ground underneath that deck, I think that can be accomplished. You can
Yes.
still grant the variance with the condition that the post be moved back.
Okay.
That's my thought.
Everybody happy with that answer? You want to explore it or anything more?
Good for me.
I'm in agreement with that.
Okay. In that case, we're reclosing the hearing. And
Gary, after.
Gary, what was that motion again?
With the condition.
And add the condition.
I move we grant the application for variance for Article 4, 220-21A1 and 2 to allow a structure elevated dog run to be built within the 25-foot no disturb wetlands buffer with a condition of moving the one support post that is within the buffer zone back out of the zone on the property located at 118 Sweet Hill Road, tax map 69, lot 38.
I will second that motion.
Okay. I'm not, okay, I'm not going to go through all the elements again with that change. I guess my only question is, is the board satisfied with that? Okay, so the concerns we'd had earlier were about 5 and 1, I believe. And we're saying by moving that, by adding the condition of moving the posts, we're satisfying 1 and 5. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, Dee, do you have that all down?
I do.
Okay. Jim, it's not usually this complex. Dee, would you call the vote?
John Blinn,
Yes?
Jonathan Gifford,
Yes.
Gary Ingham,
Yes.
Peter Bealow.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ethan, it should have been Ethan Connolly, Peter Bealow.
Yes.
I didn't take it as a slight, I hope you didn't. Okay, so that's passed unanimously. Let's go on to the wetlands buffer variance, the second buffer request, or variance request. Gary?
I move to grant the application for variance from Article 4, 220, oh, that's one I already, same one. 220-21B, 1 and 2, and allow the structure elevated dog run with the same amendments as the prior motion.
You don't need to on
Oh,
this
I don't
one.
have to do it again? Okay.
No.
Okay, to be built within a 50-foot no construction wetlands buffer on property located 118 Sweet Hill Road, tax map 69, lot 38.
Okay, as we think about precedent, we have allowed structures.
I'm sorry, I don't have a second.
Oh,
I second.
Thank you.
thank you. We have in the past, on occasion, allowed this. It's not uniformly granted. And again, as we think back to the first variance, we're not just talking about the 13 I keep saying pilings, I'm thinking it's in the East River or something. 13 posts, but we're also looking at the overhang of the deck per Mike Dorman. Okay?
Does the overhang doesn't touch anything,
Just the posts.
so why would it be an issue?
The building inspector
Said it is.
determined that. I'm just saying, just take it into consideration. It's the variances for
He
the whole thing.
determined that they were
not-
structures. He determined
Right.
that they were a building structure. He didn't determine that they were a hazard or anything else, just that
Right.
they were
It's a
considered
structure.
a building structure.
Correct.
And that's what requisited the variance request.
Right, the question is whether the posts alone are the structure or the post plus decking. Okay? Okay, so proposed variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Again, don't think it is. Good use of the land, it's pretty creative. Pretty creative use, actually. Still allows good, if there's any water flow underneath, heavy rain situation still allows water to run. Collection of waste is a good thing, keeps that out of the ground. Spirit and intent of the ordinance is preserved. Again, I think it is because, we have a very, very limited amount of area on the ground being affected by this variance, just those posts. The fact that there's a deck above it, I think, is almost irrelevant. Substantial justice in granting, because there's really no gain to the general public in denying this, while there is a loss to the applicant if we don't grant it. I don't have to do all the talking here, folks. You're doing a great job.
You're doing good, yeah.
Okay, values of surrounding properties won't be diminished. Again, I don't see any diminishment of property values. 125 feet of trees to the neighbor. I don't think the cars getting smashed across the road will care. So that's that. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. True, because while it is a large lot, about 2.8, 3 acres, it's a lot of it is unusable, and if we applied the ordinance literally, it just takes more of it away from use. Questions, comments?
I just have a question. Between the 25 and 50, is that, I can't see if it's poorly or if it's.
I put a diagram up on the
I've
board
got that,
over
but
there.
I can't see it on the
Oh,
topo
on the top
here.
of the map.
If it's poorly or if it's well drained.
If he was.
Poorly drained.
It had to be poorly drained, because if it was very poorly drained, he would have had to ask for the additional section of letter C, 1 and 2.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions, comments? We're ready to vote?
I am ready to vote.
Okay. D,
Jonathan Gifford,
Yes.
Gary Ingham,
Yes.
Ethan Connolly,
Yes.
Peter Bealow,
yeah,
John Blinn.
Yes.
okay.
It's the hardest part of my job is remember to rotate the names.
Well, you don't have to. It's not a requirement anywhere, is it?
I felt special being first.
I mean, I'm not suggesting she not do it, but
It was established, the policy was established many, many years ago because it was felt it was an issue that somebody would always vote the same way the chairman voted if the chairman went first. So that's why they decided to do the
can see
rotation
that.
of the vote.
well, it is a rotation. It's not necessarily a linear rotation. That's all.
And on to variance
Variance,
next.
variance C. Okay, the 50-foot setback. I still, okay, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to grant the application for variance from Article 5, 220-321 to allow a structure, elevated dog run, and a portion of the enclosed dog run to be built within the 50-foot front property setback requirements for the property located at 118 Sweet Hill Road, tax map 69, lot 38.
Do we have a second?
I
Second.
second it.
John gets it.
Gotta be a little faster.
Frankly, I understand, definitions and all, but I still emotionally have an issue considering both streets on a corner lot to be frontage. You know, if their driveway is onto Sweet Hill Road, that ought to be the frontage of that lot. And,
You would think so, that's where the front door is.
yeah,
Quite honestly, on this one of the 50 feet, with the junkyard right across the street and pretty much a heavy commercial, 108.
yeah.
This isn't a little residential place where you're worrying about the noise, the sight, the line of sight, all of the variables that would go along with if they were on Partridge Lane or something.
Right.
You're looking at 108 with an industrial site straight across the street, and, a fair distance between the church and them, and anybody behind them has 2 acres of buffer of trees.
Right.
So that 50 feet for me is kind of moot. I understand it has to be
Dealt with.
overridden,
Right.
but to me, it's really not a big,
Not in this point. I agree.
Okay, well, let's go.
read through.
Proposed variances in contrary to the public interest. Yeah.
I'll get it between Charlie, I've got to put the password in again. You failed me, Charlie, you failed me.
Again. It's not really against, contrary to the public interest, there's no loss to the public on this. Spirit and intent of the ordinance preserved, they're keeping as far back as they can, but, frankly, there's not a large reason to have this ordinance used on the 108 side of this property, given the industrial nature across the street and how far they are from other abutters. Substantial justice is granted in granting the variance. There's no gain to the general public in saying no to this. Again, I don't think it'll cause a loss of crushing business across the street. And anyhow, there clearly would be a loss to the applicant in not granting this. So values of surrounding properties won't be diminished, just like the last two. Literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Well, because, this is an unusual lot, and really, the reason these runs are located where they are is because of the wetlands on the lot, pushing them that way. So it would be unreasonable not to grant. Agreed? I mean, conceptually, any other comments?
Said my piece.
Okay. B.
Gary Ingham,
Yes.
Ethan Connolly,
Yes.
Peter Bealow,
Yes.
John Blinn,
Yes,
John Gifford.
Yes.
Okay.
that would be last.
We're out of deliberative session. So,
Thank you. Geez, maybe I should just open a kennel on my. Is there that much money in the kennel?
A lot of dogs.
A lot of dogs. They're looking for a dog park in town. So we only have one tonight?
No,
the streets,
more
yeah,
coming.
because the state, there's,
Charlie's got the other one,
yeah,
too.
that's only to the edge of the easement.
I thought we only have one more.
One more, but he's asking for 2.
Oh, I got you. That goes along with not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Oh, yeah.
And medication doesn't help.
Charlie's right.
Stay away from knives.
Just wrap me up in bubble wrap.
Did we lose the applicant from the second set? Oh, I'm sorry, you were hiding him. I thought Charlie had walked out with
Gonna get to go home.
the ladies. Okay, Dee, would you read the next set of applications?
Case number 20-04, a request from Shelby Mustang Realty Trust, care of Joseph Poist, for a variance from Article 4, Section 22021A, 1 and 2 to permit a garage to be built within the 25-foot no-cut, no-disturb wetland buffer. The property is located at 21 Sequoia Lane, tax map 63, lot 70 in the LDR district. The applicant is the property owner of record. Case number 20-05, request from Shelby Mustang Realty Trust, care of Joseph Poist, for a variance from Article 4, Section 220-21B, 1 and 2, and C, 1 and 2, to permit a garage to be built within the 50 and 75-foot no-construction wetland buffers. Property is located at 21 Sequoia Lane, tax map 63, lot 70 in the LDR district. The applicant is the property owner of record.
And before we get going, I will note that the movie Ford versus Ferrari, which is all about Shelby's, was an awesome movie. If you haven't seen it, consider doing so.
Noted.
I second that. I've seen it twice now.
Yeah, it's definitely worthwhile.
Absolutely.
Okay, what do we have here, Mr. Zilch?
Bring up the pictometry. We were over on Sequoia Lane this time. So for the record, Charlie Zilch from SCC. I'm here on behalf of Shelby Mustang Realty, care of Joseph Poist. And this is for a request for 2 variances for his property located at 21 Sequoia Lane. One to allow for construction of a proposed attached 2-car garage to be within the 25-foot no-cut, no-disturb buffer and the 50-foot, 75-foot wetland buffer. So here's an overhead view of the property. This is a 0.53 acre lot.
Charlie, hit the expansion button in the middle.
And I can also go to the plan view as well. So you can see here, this is a 0.53 acre lot. It's got 150 feet of frontage on Sequoia Lane. The lot was created in 1967 as part of that subdivision, the Wildwood subdivision. The site lies entirely in the LDR zone. Situated on the lot is Mr. Poist's 3-bedroom single-family home, and that was constructed right around 1989. The driveway, the dwelling is served by its own individual on-site septic system, which is located roughly in here, and a well. And then you have a driveway coming in from Sequoia Lane. And as you can see, this driveway comes in from Sequoia, runs down the left side of the house, where it terminates into a parking area adjacent to the house right here. In between the house and, off to the left of the parking area driveway, you can see there's a pretty substantial wetland complex that runs through a portion of the property. So this wetland was delineated by our soil scientist, Timothy Fawerda. It's a complex made of both poorly drained and very poorly drained soils. For the most part, it's considerably all poorly drained. Let me get back to the plan view here. I can show you the delineation on that. Just turn your thought about 90 degrees from where we just had it. This is the wetland complex over here on the left side of the lot. There's just a small portion of poorly drained soil at the very limit here, but for the most part, it's all very poorly drained. This wetland run runs underneath Sequoia Lane. There's a series of culverts, and it passes out and continues on from there. So what Mr. Poist is considering is proposed for your consideration is basically just an attached 2-car garage, and this garage is going to be placed entirely within the paved driveway area. So with a 24 by 24 garage, which would allow him 2-car garage storage, that'll put the garage at its closest point, about 23 feet away from the poorly drained soil and about 23.5 feet away from the very poorly drained soil. The actual edge of the pavement comes out a little bit further, but he'll remove that. And in its place, as I ask all my clients now, if we can do anything to improve a little bit of site drainage, let's do it. So we're going to put in, again, one of these infiltration trenches around the back and the side to capture some of the roof drainage for the new garage and maybe even some of the existing pave. Right now, it's just basically sheet flow off the existing driveway. There's no drainage whatsoever. So even though we're replacing impervious with impervious, I've asked him to add that in, and he has no problem complying with that as well. There is going to be enclosed 4-foot wide walkway in the back here. This would also be within the 50 and 75-foot setback. That 50 and 75-foot setback will actually put you over here on this side of the house. So this would be entirely within it. So those are the two variances. To be within the 25-foot no cut buffer by about a foot, 2 feet, and then to be entirely within the 75/50-foot poorly and very poorly drained setbacks.
Now, just so I understand you correctly,
Yep.
you're saying the existing dwelling that's already there is within that setback to start with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, this is, like I said, the house was built in the late 80s. I don't know what the setback was in the town at the time, but I would imagine it was probably a little less restrictive than what it is now. The lot was created back in, like I said, 67.
And the building, the proposed building is gonna go over top of the current impervious surface, and you're actually gonna
Absolutely,
take
yep.
away and
Yep.
add some pervious surface to it, potentially improving.
Yeah, so you probably have a slight decrease in total impervious surface, because you're going to remove that strip along the left side of the driveway over here, but you are adding a little bit more of an enclosed walkway, but it does have a patio area back here as well. So I think, in all, it's probably a wash as far as impervious area. It'd be about the same as what you started with.
And I should've looked
But
at
it will be drained better.
Yes. Yep.
That was gonna be my question, if, I didn't see anything in here, if there was, kinda tough on a site plan, but if he's gonna do gutters or something to guide the storm water back over to your, where you have that runoff area.
This, the roof line will be peaked right down the middle here, so this half will get over, I'm sorry, went the wrong way. The peak will be right through here.
Yep.
So the drainage out to the front of the driveway, he's going to capture that with gutter, so that it comes down and he can direct it into that infiltration trench, and then it'll just be sheet flow off the roof down into the infiltration trench in the back.
Man, this is a tight lot.
And right now, you can see we've shown the existing tree line. That's right out, that probably comes out about 15 or so feet off the edge of the wetland. And then this area in here is currently lawn space. He's not going to, there's no trees to be cut. There's no, he's not going to add any additional lawn area. That buffer that's there now will remain as is. There's no need to impact that is all.
This is so
I'm
tight.
gonna open my big yap. Why don't people just build within the constraints? And he builds a 24 by 22 and doesn't have to deal with any of this. And I understand the extra 2 feet for a garage, but it's just, I always wonder why people don't look at the variance and just say, I can shimmy out 2 feet off of the property.
Although it still would violate one, you know, he'd still be here for one variance.
Right, but that's already precedent by the house and everything else.
I mean, apparently he can't even put up a shed anywhere here on this property.
No, I think that's why it's on the back of the property, somebody else's property way out back.
Yeah, the only other potential location, like I said, would be up here in the front, but that's occupied by his leach field right here.
Right.
The stone, I think it's a concrete chambered system in the front yard. And that point would be about the furthest point away from any wetlands where you'd want your septic system.
Basically, with the sheet runoff of the driveway, you'd be doing a bonus by putting the building in, understandably so. But
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
by the sheet runoff from the driveway, you're actually benefiting the wetlands by putting the building on there and doing a collection system. Because you're grabbing more of the water.
Thank you.
Charlie, this, on the plan next to the garage, this kind of bolded area, is that a retaining wall or?
No, that's a proposed core log, which is basically just erosion control device.
Okay.
It's just basically, we've
All
got
those
a,
rolled up?
right
kinda,
there.
yeah,
Yep.
Okay.
I see you guys talked to Concom,
We did.
and they're
They had no objection with it.
Okay, well, shall we, any other questions or comments before we go through the criteria? Okay, take it away.
Okay. Not contrary to the public interest for pretty much all the reasons we just talked about. It is a residential garage on a residential home. We're not going to increase impervious here. We're going to add some infiltration to collect some of the stormwater flow. No additional cutting of the buffer and no other logical placement of it. So in all, not contrary to the public interest. No negative effect to the general health, welfare, and safety of the general public.
Okay,
And spirit and intent, obviously, the intent of the ordinance is to protect the wetlands as best as possible. You have an existing condition here. We're not going to be increasing impervious, which I think is probably the biggest factor here, and that we're actually going to install some infiltration and help preserve stormwater quality here. And then again, no buffers are going to be cut, and no need to. And then substantial justice in granting the variance. Allow Mr. Poist the most effective means of achieving his goal here of finding garage storage. Also takes vehicles that are parked outside and puts them within a stored area, which also, I think, enhances the safety aspect and protection of the wetlands as well.
okay,
And value of the surroundings properties will not be diminished. Well, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a residential garage within a residential neighborhood for residential use. And unnecessary hardship. Well, I think that's pretty straightforward here. Denial would be unnecessary hardship due to the uniqueness of the building, the yard space location in relation to the wetlands, and lack of a reasonable alternative siting area. And his request is, I think, a very reasonable request just for a residential garage for an existing dwelling.
okay. Same answers on the second variance?
Yes.
I think it's like literally the
It
same.
is exactly the same.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or comments? Jim, do you have anything down there? Anybody speaking in favor of this? I'll note that there's nobody out there. We do have a letter from Concom.
Yes.
That supports this application.
This is addressed to the zoning board. The owner of 21 Sequoia Lane would like to construct a 24-foot by 24-foot two-car garage. The area where the garage is to be built is currently paved and already intrudes into the 50-foot wetlands buffer. The proposed garage would intrude 2 feet into the 25-foot no-cut, no-disturb buffer. Given the small buffer intrusion, the Conservation Commission supports the two-car garage.
Okay. Nothing else, gang? Nothing else?
That'll do.
Okay, then I call this hearing to a close. Does anybody out there have a motion for us? Dr. Ingham? Could be somebody else.
I move to grant the application for variance from Article 4, 220-21, A1 and 2 to allow a residential garage to be built within a 25-foot no-disturb wetlands buffer on the property located at 21 Sequoia Lane, tax map 63, lot 70.
We have a second?
Second.
Of course, we could put it up on posts like we did the last applicant. No? Okay. So, shall we just go down the criteria, or do folks have comments first?
No, no comments over here.
Okay. So the proposed variance isn't contrary to the public interest. Well, enclosing some vehicles, making it more difficult to have oils wash out into the wetlands right there. The extra, what do you call it?
Filtration?
Filtrations area, I think that's all in the public interest.
Absolutely. I mean, during the winter, you bring your cars in, you've got salt all over them. Just sitting there on a runoff,
Yeah.
going right into the wetlands. Considering it goes into a garage after that, dries up, falls off, they sweep it up and away you go.
And dump it in the wetlands.
And
Just
knock
kidding.
it off.
2, spirit and intent of the ordinance is preserved. Well, we have a minimal intrusion, but on the other hand, with that filtration system, we're improving things. We're improving the runoff from that area, the paved area. So, yeah, I think it meets the spirit and intent because of that.
If there wasn't a paved area prior to, I'd have a little bit of a problem with the 2 feet.
Absolutely.
Because it's already pre-existing.
Right.
You're essentially fixing a problem that was developed when the rules were different.
Right. There's substantial justice in granting the variance. There's, again, in not granting it, the public isn't gaining anything. We're still having sheeting off of that driveway. In granting it, we're going to have the filtration area put in there to deal with that to some level. So again, if we didn't grant it, it's actually going against the public interest, and we should grant it. Values of surrounding properties won't be diminished. Well, judging from the images we saw, there's virtually no surrounding properties, or at least they're at a good distance through the trees. The only property that can see this proposed garage is like across the street at a good distance, and I don't think it affects his property value at all.
It'll probably increase his property value because his property value is going to be increased with this. So
True.
can't see that as a negative.
Yep. Literal enforcement of the provision of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Definitely because it's such a small lot with almost, I'd say, at least 40% of it being covered as wetlands.
And again, I mean, they're just making a current situation
Better, yeah. So those are the reasons I think we're in good stead in saying yes. You guys ready? Want to call the roll?
Call the vote.
D.
Ethan Connolly,
Yes.
Peter Bealow,
Yes, ma'am.
John Blinn,
Yes?
John Gifford,
Yes.
Gary Ingham.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
the Johns that mess me up.
You got to learn to pronounce John with an N and John with an HN differently.
I'll work on that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's only the
one more.
first.
No, that's right.
They're holding in place for me in Danville, so that's all.
Okay. Would somebody read this one? Let's have somebody else other than Gary.
He's doing a great job.
I'll move to grant the application for a variance from Article 220-21B 1 and 2 and C.1 and 2 to allow a residential garage to be built within the 50-foot and 75-foot no construction wetland buffer on the property located at 21 Sequoia Lane, tax map 63, lot 70.
Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. Any discussion before we go down the criteria?
I don't even think we have to go down the criteria, do we?
You do for the record.
For the record. For the record, we could state it's the same answers as on the last variance request.
You could do that.
Are we good with that answer?
Yes.
D, we're ready.
Peter Bealow,
Yes.
John Blinn,
Yes?
Jonathan Gifford,
Yes.
Gary Ingham,
Yes.
Ethan Connolly.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. D, do you have anything else for,
Now you're all set, Charlie.
have a good night.
Bye, Charlie.
D, do you have anything else for us this evening?
You all were given town reports.
Yes.
Could I borrow yours for just a quick second? I forgot to check this, but I don't think this board has anybody up this year that we need to reappoint.
That's good.
And while I'm searching, the other thing that is in your packet is the save the date notification for the best planning and zoning conference that is offered each year. Yeah, we have nobody up next year. Registrations aren't open yet, but this is the one that everybody likes to go to. So,
And as we remember from last year,
Yes.
Try to show up a little early because that room filled up
Fills
quick.
quick.
Although I
Yes.
gotta say, having the table that we had last year right near the back, right next to an entrance, was probably infinitely better than being in the middle and not being able to get out. So,
I was the first one, literally the first one in the state there last year. I'll try to do that again this year.
and you
grab
nabbed that table. Thank you.
did.
You done good.
Just need the spotter.
It's close to the door that's near the bathroom. I
And
mean,
the
it's
food.
common sense.
And the food.
And the food. The food is always really good at this conference, too.
So Jim, this is like an all-day, 8 to 4,
8 to 3, 8 to 3.
no, it says 4.
Does it? Okay.
8 to
Sometimes
4
they're
event up in, it's on last Saturday in May.
Yeah, the same night as Tyler Pinkman's Eagle ceremony, same day as Tyler's Eagle ceremony.
Is that during the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't be attending this.
Yeah, you won't be,
No, Jim.
which is sad. It's,
he changes
just looking, into the future, it's a good, they do a nice job at this conference. Personally, I think the first session tends to be a waste, but that's what they do a history of, and
Well, it depends on what they pick as the plenary session, because sometimes, I've been to some plenary sessions that were really, really cool plenary sessions, but it
then-
all depends on what they pick.
so this is for planning board members and zoning board members. And they break up into smaller sessions, so you sign up for what you want to go to. They always have a, your first year zoning board, here's what you need to know. They always have a first year planning board thing, here's what you need to know. The session I went to last year that I enjoyed the most was the one that, the one about recent changes to the law and recent court cases, where they went through, there was an issue at Dartmouth, and the court case was just hilarious. The judge really publicly scolded the applicant. It was really good. But anyway, it's interesting court
I
cases.
think it's online as well, that you could do a viewing with it
Can you?
at a different time, isn't it?
They usually put the PowerPoints and stuff up online.
Yeah.
Okay,
But they don't tape it,
they don't,
no.
okay.
no.
But it's-
They haven't in the past. I mean, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't going forward, but, because I think it has been suggested that they do that, but then they're not going to get their $75 a person out of us if they,
Right.
Yeah, and that obviously the town pays, except we pay for gas, so we usually try to carpool a bit, so. All right,
So I will let you know, I will send an email out when the registration opens, but keep it in mind, I did ask for it to be put into the budget that everybody would get to go. Because they ask me every year for budgetary purposes, and I just said, sign them all up. So at least the money's there if you want to go.
okay.
There's been years before where I've had to be able to say, if you went last year, you can't go this year, kind of thing, but we're all in.
Okay, anything else new from the town here?
That's all I have.
In that case, I will call this meeting adjourned.